Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the massive starship Retribution, watching the stars bend and twist as her fleet dropped out of quantum-fold space. 500 years. 500 long years since humanity had been driven from their home like wild animals. Now they were back, and the galaxy would remember why it had feared them in the first place. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of advanced systems that no alien mind could have imagined. Sarah's crew moved with perfect coordination, their thoughts linked through neural networks that the old galactic hegemony had tried to force on humans centuries ago. The difference was that humans had chosen this connection. They had made it their own. "Fleet status report," Sarah commanded, her voice calm but carrying the weight of 5 centuries of exile. "All ships ready, Captain," replied Commander Torres, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. 2,000 vessels in attack formation, another 8,000 support ships holding position at the edge of the system. Sarah nodded. 10,000 ships. It was more than the entire galactic hegemony fleet when they had driven humanity out. But numbers were not what would win this war. It was what humanity had become during their long exile that would shake the galaxy to its core. She walked to the main viewing screen and touched a control. The display showed Earth, blue and green and beautiful, just as it had been when the aliens forced them to leave. But now it was an alien world, populated by species that had carved up human civilization like scavengers. "Do you remember the stories, Commander?" Sarah asked, not turning around. Torres joined her at the screen. "My grandmother told me about the day they came, how the aliens smiled and called us interesting and primitive but promising, how they studied us like insects. They thought they understood us," Sarah said. "They saw our wars, our chaos, our refusal to follow their neat little rules. They decided we were too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species." The memory files played in Sarah's mind, passed down through generations of exiled humans. The galactic hegemony had arrived with 12 different alien species, all united, in their belief that the universe should be orderly, predictable, and controlled. They had offered humanity a place in their civilization, but only if humans accepted neural implants that would make them calm and obedient. When humanity refused, the aliens had been shocked. Every other species they encountered had gratefully accepted the implants. Why would any intelligent race choose chaos over peace? Why would they prefer dangerous freedom over safe slavery? The war that followed had been brief and brutal. Humanity fought with everything they had, but they were young and inexperienced in space warfare. The aliens had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could turn aside nuclear weapons. In the end, Earth's governments had no choice but to surrender. But the aliens had made a mistake. Instead of destroying humanity or forcing the implants on them, they had chosen exile. They herded humans onto colony ships and sent them to the galaxy's edge, beyond the borders of civilized space. The hegemony leaders thought this was mercy. They believed humans would either die in the void or eventually return, beaten and ready to accept their place in the ordered universe. They had been wrong about everything. "Status of the advanced scouts?" Sarah asked. "Reconnaissance complete on 12 hegemony border systems," reported Lieutenant Kim from her station. "They have no idea we're coming. Their technology is almost identical to what they had 5 centuries ago." Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. While the aliens had spent 500 years maintaining their perfect, stable civilization, humanity had been forged in the fire of survival. Cut off from all resources except their own minds and determination, they had been forced to innovate, or die. The neural networks that connected human minds were just the beginning. Humans had learned to think together while remaining individuals. They had developed quantum-fold drives that could bend space in ways that broke alien physics. Most importantly, they had learned to use their greatest weakness as their greatest strength. Chaos, unpredictability, the very things the aliens feared about humanity had become weapons of incredible power. "Begin the first phase," Sarah ordered. Across the fleet, human ships shimmered and seemed to fade from normal space. They were still there, but existing in quantum states that made them impossible to track or target. It was a trick that alien minds trained to think in orderly patterns could never have discovered. The first targets were hegemony listening posts on the edge of their territory, small stations with powerful sensors designed to watch for threats from the void. The aliens manning these stations had grown lazy over the centuries. Nothing dangerous had ever come from the empty space beyond their borders. The attack was silent and swift. Human ships appeared inside the station's shields, their crews moving with mechanical precision to disable defenses and capture personnel. Within minutes, 12 border posts simply went dark, their last transmissions cut off mid-sentence. Sarah watched the tactical display as red lights marked each successful capture. Not a single human life had been lost. They had planned this operation for decades, running simulations and preparing for every possible scenario. Interrogation teams report success, Commander Torres announced. We have complete intelligence on hegemony fleet positions, defense systems, and command structures. They haven't changed their tactics in 300 years. Of course they hadn't, why would they? The galactic hegemony had achieved perfect stability. No wars, no conflicts, no surprises. Their neural implants made sure that every citizen thought the same, safe, predictable thoughts. They had created a civilization of infinite peace and zero growth. It was exactly what humanity had spent 5 centuries learning to exploit. Sarah pulled up the strategic map, showing the entire hegemony territory. Thousands of worlds, billions of alien beings, all living in the same controlled paradise their ancestors had chosen over the dangerous chaos of true freedom. They think we're coming back as the same species they drove out, Sarah said to her assembled officers. Emotional, chaotic, unpredictable humans who couldn't accept their perfect order. She touched controls that highlighted the next phase targets: military bases, communication hubs, industrial centers. The vital organs of alien civilization, all protected by defenses designed to stop the humans of 500 years ago. They have no idea what we've become, Sarah continued. They don't know that we've learned to channel our chaos into purpose. They can't imagine that our unpredictability has become a science. They never considered that emotional, chaotic humans might be exactly what this galaxy needs. The bridge crew listened with the focused attention of soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Every human in the fleet knew the stories. Every one of them carried the memory of exile, passed down through generations of survivors who had refused to give up their essential humanity. Signal the fleet, Sarah commanded. Phase 2 begins in 6 hours. We're going home, but not as the species that left. We're returning as what humanity was always meant to become. As the Retribution and its escort fleet moved deeper into hegemony space, Sarah allowed herself a moment to think about Earth. Soon, very soon, humans would walk on their homeworld again. But first, the galaxy would learn that driving out humanity had been the greatest mistake in galactic history. The aliens had wanted order and stability. They were about to discover that sometimes the universe needed chaos to grow, and chaos was what humanity did best. Admiral Zeth Kalar of the Vraxian Navy received the first reports while enjoying his morning meditation in the perfect gardens of Kepler Station. The news was so unexpected that his neural implants struggled to process the information. Border stations had gone silent. All 12 outer listening posts had stopped transmitting at exactly the same time. Technical malfunction, he told his aide, a young Vraxian whose blue skin showed the calm patterns of someone who had never known true conflict. Send maintenance ships to investigate. But Zethkalar felt a strange stirring in the depths of his mind, something his implants couldn't quite suppress. His grandfather had fought in the human war 5 centuries ago. The old Vraxian had told stories about the chaotic, unpredictable species that had refused the gift of neural peace. Impossible, Zethkalar muttered. The humans were gone, scattered to the void and probably extinct by now. Even if some had survived, they were primitives who could barely manage spaceflight when the hegemony had exiled them. The maintenance ships reached the first listening post 6 hours later. What they found sent shockwaves through the hegemony command structure. The station was intact but empty, its crew missing and all data cores wiped clean. There were no signs of battle, no damage to the hull, no indication of how anyone could have gotten past the shields. By the time reports came in from all 12, Stations, Zethkalar was no longer thinking about technical malfunctions. Someone had conducted a coordinated assault on hegemony territory, and they had done it with technology and tactics the aliens had never seen before. "Summon the fleet," he ordered, his implants flooding his system with calming chemicals to prevent panic. "Full battle readiness. Whatever this is, we'll crush it quickly and return to peace." The hegemony's military response was exactly what their enemies expected. Massive fleets of identical ships moving in perfect formations, following battle, plans that had been refined over centuries of theoretical study. No hegemony officer had fought a real war in over 400 years, but their simulations were flawless. Zethkalar commanded the response from his flagship, a kilometer-long dreadnought armed with enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Around him, 300 ships moved in precise geometric patterns, their crews linked through neural networks that eliminated confusion and fear. They reached the outer system where the listening posts had been attacked and found nothing. Empty space, normal radiation levels, no trace of whoever had struck at hegemony territory. Zethkalar ordered a full sensor sweep, confident that their advanced detection systems would reveal any hidden threat. That was when the humans decided to introduce themselves. The first sign was a shift in local spacetime that made the Vraxian sensors scream warnings. Then human ships began appearing, not from hyperspace or any known form of faster-than-light travel, but from quantum dimensions that alien physics said were impossible to access. The human fleet was smaller than Zethkalar's force, maybe 50 ships total. He smiled with satisfaction, his implants releasing chemicals that enhanced his confidence. Whatever tricks these unknown enemies possessed, they were vastly outnumbered. "All ships attack Formation Delta," he commanded. "Destroy the intruders." The hegemony fleet responded with mechanical precision, their heavy weapons charging and their shields forming an impenetrable wall of energy. It was the same tactic they had used successfully for centuries, a wall of overwhelming firepower that could crush any opposition. The humans did something the aliens had never seen before. They scattered, not in panic, not in fear, but in a pattern so complex and chaotic that no computer could predict where each ship would be from one second to the next. They moved like a school of fish, like a flock of birds, like dancers who knew each other's thoughts. Zethkalar's carefully aimed weapons fired at empty space. His targeting computers, designed for enemies who moved in logical patterns, couldn't track the human ships. The enemy vessels seemed to exist in multiple places at once, phasing in and out of normal space in ways that hurt to think about. Then the humans began their counterattack. Human weapons were unlike anything in hegemony databases. Instead of trying to punch through shields with brute force, they seemed to find gaps that shouldn't exist. Energy beams curved around deflector, screens missiles passed through solid matter, and some weapons appeared to fire backwards through time to hit targets before they were launched. The first hegemony ship to die was a heavy cruiser on the formation's left flank. One moment it was there, shields at full power and weapons firing. The next moment, it simply came apart, its hull separating into neat sections as if invisible. Hands had carefully disassembled it. "How?" Zethkalar gasped, his neural implants struggling to maintain calm in the face of the impossible. More ships died. A destroyer vanished entirely, leaving only empty space where it had been. A battleship's weapons turned on its own fleet, firing with mechanical precision at its allies before its own systems shut down. A carrier launched its fighters, but the small craft immediately turned and attacked their mothership. The human ships moved through the hegemony formation like ghosts, untouchable and deadly. Their crews seemed to anticipate every Vraxian move, dodging weapons fire before it was even launched and striking at weak points that no one should have been able to identify. Zethkalar realized with growing horror that he was watching the destruction of everything the hegemony believed about warfare. Their perfect tactics, their overwhelming firepower, their technological superiority. None of it mattered against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of logical combat. "Retreat," he ordered. But even that was too late. The human ships had surrounded his fleet while he wasn't watching, moving through dimensions his sensors couldn't detect. Every escape route was blocked, every formation broken, every advantage turned into a liability. A human ship appeared directly in front of Zethkalar's flagship, close enough that he could see figures moving behind its transparent hull. They looked human, but there was something different about them. They moved with perfect coordination while maintaining individual identity, connected but not controlled. The human ship opened a communication channel, and Zethkalar heard a voice, speaking in perfect Vraxian. "Admiral Zethkalar," the voice said, calm and professional. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Retribution. You have fought bravely, but this battle is over. Surrender your fleet and no more of your people need to die." "Human?" Zethkalar's voice cracked with disbelief. "That's impossible. Your species was exiled. You were primitives." "We were many things," Captain Chen replied. "Now we are what 5 centuries of survival has made us. You taught us that we were too chaotic, too unpredictable for civilized space. We've learned to make those traits into strengths you cannot imagine. Around them." The battle had stopped. 300 hegemony ships sat motionless, their systems disabled by technology they couldn't understand. The human fleet hung in space like patient predators, waiting for their admiral's response. "Your people drove us out because we wouldn't accept your implants," Chen continued. "You wanted to make us calm and orderly like yourselves. But chaos has its own kind of order, Admiral. Unpredictability has its own logic. You never learned that because you were too afraid to try." Zethkalar looked at his tactical display, trying to understand how his overwhelming advantage had become total defeat in less than an hour. His neural implants were screaming warnings, flooding his system with chemicals to prevent panic, but even they couldn't hide the truth. The humans had returned, and they were no longer the primitive species the hegemony had exiled. They had become something new, something that turned their greatest weaknesses into weapons of incredible power. "We surrender," Zethkalar whispered. The word spread through hegemony space at faster than light speed. Admiral Zethkalar, hero of a dozen simulation battles, had been defeated by 50 human ships. The greatest fleet in Vraxian history had been neutralized without destroying a single enemy vessel. For the first time in centuries, the ordered peace of the galactic hegemony began to crack. Fear, an emotion that neural implants were designed to suppress, began to spread from world to world. The humans were back, and they had learned to weaponize chaos itself. The news of Admiral Zethkalar's defeat spread through hegemony space like a virus, infecting the perfect order of alien civilization with something it had not experienced in centuries: fear. On the Colonian homeworld, citizens gathered in their meditation centers, seeking comfort from neural implants that suddenly seemed inadequate. On Thraxan trade stations, merchants whispered stories of ghost ships that could appear inside shields and weapons that violated the laws of physics. But it was on the primitive world of Nexar Prime where the fear hit deepest. Elder Morvac of the Nexarian Council stood before the Great Communication Array, his forearms trembling as he composed a message to the Hegemony High Command. His people had been the first to encounter humans 5 centuries ago, the first to realize that these chaotic bipeds represented a threat to galactic order. "Honored commanders," he dictated to the recording device, his voice heavy with dread, "the humans have returned, and they are not what they once were. I have studied the battle reports from Kepler Station. I have analyzed the tactical recordings. These are not the primitive warriors we drove from Earth." He paused, his implants releasing calming chemicals that no longer seemed to work. "They have evolved into something we never imagined possible, something that makes a mockery of everything we believe about civilization and order." Meanwhile, in a hidden base carved into an asteroid in the Vega system, human intelligence officers monitored hegemony communications. The aliens were panicking, and panic was exactly what humanity needed. Commander Maria Santos reviewed the intercepts with satisfaction. "Fear is spreading faster than our fleets," she reported to Captain Chen via quantum entanglement communicator. "The Hegemony Council has called emergency sessions. 3 member species are demanding explanations for Zethkalar's defeat." "Good," came Chen's reply from the Retribution. "Fear will do more damage than our weapons ever could. These species have lived in artificial peace for so long that they've forgotten how to handle real threats." Santos nodded, studying the psychological profiles her team had compiled over decades of careful observation. The hegemony races had evolved differently from humans. Where humans had thrived on conflict and chaos, growing stronger through adversity, the aliens had chosen the safety of neural control and predictable order. It was a fundamental difference that would determine the outcome of this war. On the hegemony capital world of Centauri Major, Supreme Commander Veltar of the United Fleet convened an emergency meeting of the military high command. Representatives from all 12 member species attended via hologram, their various forms united by the same expression of controlled panic. The humans possess technology beyond our understanding, reported Chief Science Officer Quindal, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. Our analysis of the Kepler station battle reveals weapons that operate outside known physics, ships that exist in quantum superposition, tactics that seem to anticipate our moves before we make them. Impossible, growled General Thokmar of the Bruthan warrior caste. No species can advance that far in mere centuries. They were primitives when we exiled them. That's exactly the problem, Veltar replied, his ancient voice carrying the weight of long experience. We assumed they would remain static like ourselves. We never considered that chaos and conflict might be evolutionary advantages. The meeting continued for hours, with each species offering theories about human capabilities and strategies for defeating them. But every proposal ran into the same problem. They were trying to fight an enemy that didn't follow the rules of civilized warfare. Human fleets had been spotted throughout hegemony territory, but they never stayed in one place long enough to engage. They would appear, strike at military installations or communication hubs, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Worse, they seemed to know exactly which targets would cause maximum disruption with minimum casualties. It was psychological, warfare on a scale the hegemony had never experienced. Dr. Yishka of the Mindkeeper Guild, specialists in neural implant technology, presented her findings to the assembled commanders. The humans appear to have developed their own form of mental linking, she explained, her tentacles writhing with agitation. But unlike our implants, which create order through suppression of chaotic thoughts, the human system amplifies individual creativity while maintaining group coordination. She displayed brain scans captured from human prisoners taken centuries ago, comparing them to recent intelligence gathered from the Kepler station battle. They have learned to think as both individuals and collective entities simultaneously. This gives them tactical advantages we cannot replicate with our current technology. The implications were staggering. The hegemony's greatest strength, their ability to act with perfect unity through neural control, had become a weakness against an enemy that could match their coordination while maintaining the creative unpredictability they had tried to eliminate from the galaxy. Reports continued to pour in from across hegemony space. Human forces had captured the major industrial complex at Rigel 7 without firing a shot, simply convincing the automated systems to shut down production. They had disabled the communication network linking the Outer Rim colonies by introducing a virus that transformed defensive programs into poetry-writing algorithms. Most disturbing of all, they had begun broadcasting messages directly into the neural implants of hegemony civilians. The messages were simple, but terrifying. We remember. We have learned. We are coming home. On the remote mining world of Asteroid, Base Gamma 7, Foreman Krelton noticed the first signs that something was changing among his workers. The Zephyrian miners, normally docile and efficient thanks to their implants, had begun asking questions. "Why do we mine these crystals?" asked Worker Unit 7743, a question that should have been impossible for his implanted brain to form. "What happens to the materials we extract? Who benefits from our labor?" Krelton tried to activate the disciplinary protocols in the worker's implant, but the system reported no errors. The neural device was functioning perfectly, maintaining the worker's calm and compliance, but somehow not suppressing his curiosity. It was happening everywhere. Across thousands of worlds, hegemony citizens were experiencing thoughts and emotions their implants should have prevented. Not rebellion or violence. The humans were too clever for that. But simple questions about the nature of their existence. The hegemony leadership realized with growing horror that humanity was conducting a war on multiple fronts simultaneously. Military strikes to demonstrate their superior capabilities, psychological operations to spread fear and uncertainty, and most insidiously, they were somehow awakening the very traits the neural implants were designed to suppress. Supreme Commander Veltar stood alone in his command chamber, studying the tactical displays that showed human forces advancing steadily toward the core worlds. Each victory revealed new human capabilities, new technologies that shouldn't exist, new tactics that violated everything the hegemony understood about warfare. But it was the reports from civilian centers that truly frightened him. Citizens asking questions, workers requesting explanations for their tasks, artists attempting to create works that expressed individual rather than collective identity. The humans weren't just winning a military campaign. They were destroying the very foundations of hegemony civilization by reintroducing the chaos and unpredictability that neural implants had spent centuries eliminating. Veltar activated his private communication channel and sent a message to the deepest archive vaults on Centauri Major. There were records there from the original human contact, files that had been classified and forgotten for 500 years. Perhaps it was time to remember why the galaxy had feared humanity in the first place. And perhaps, if they were very lucky, those ancient records might contain some clue about how to fight an enemy that had transformed their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. But as Veltar waited for the archive data to arrive, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The humans had spent 5 centuries preparing for this return, and they had used every moment to become something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that turned order into chaos, weakness into strength, and exile into the foundation for ultimate victory. The ancient archives deep beneath Centauri Major had not been accessed in 3 centuries. As Supreme Commander Veltar descended through layers of security that required genetic keys from all 12 hegemony species, he wondered what secrets the founders had buried so deeply. The archive chamber was vast and cold, filled with crystalline storage matrices that hummed with contained data. At the center stood the primary archive, a massive structure that held the complete records of a first contact with humanity 500 years ago. Activate historical record, human contact protocol, classification level Omega, Veltar commanded. The air shimmered and holographic images began to play. Veltar watched his ancestors meeting humans for the first time, seeing the wonder and curiosity in alien eyes as they encountered galactic civilization. The humans had been so eager to learn, so excited to join the community of intelligent species. But then came the recordings that explained why the archives had been sealed. The first human to receive a neural implant had been a volunteer named Dr. James Wright, a scientist who wanted to experience the perfect order and peace the hegemony offered. The procedure was routine, identical to billions performed on other species over the millennia. Wright had screamed, not from pain. The implants were designed to eliminate physical discomfort. He screamed because the device that brought peace to other minds brought him agony. His brain had rejected the artificial order, fighting against the suppression of chaos and creativity with every neural pathway. Veltar watched in horror as the record showed other attempts. Every human who received an implant suffered the same reaction. Their minds literally tore themselves apart, rather than accept the calm, ordered thought patterns that made galactic civilization possible. Medical Report 7743 Alpha, the archive announced. Human neural architecture appears fundamentally incompatible with standard peaceful integration protocols. Recommendation: species-specific modification required. But the modifications had failed too. Human brains seemed designed to thrive on uncertainty, conflict, and unpredictable stimulus. Remove those elements, and the mind simply stopped functioning. The humans hadn't refused neural implants out of stubbornness. They had refused them to survive. The final recording was from Elder Morvac himself, 5 centuries younger, but already showing the wisdom that would guide hegemony policy. The humans represent a fundamental threat to galactic order, his image declared. Not because they are evil or violent, but because they embody chaos as a natural state. They create new ideas not in spite of conflict, but because of it. They Solve problems by embracing uncertainty rather than eliminating it. Morvak's younger self paused, his forearms gesturing in distress. If we allow them to remain in galactic civilization, they will inevitably spread their chaotic thinking to other species. They will ask questions that have no safe answers. They will propose solutions that require abandoning the stability we have worked millennia to achieve. The recording shifted to show human cities on Earth, bustling with activity that made no sense to ordered alien minds. Humans worked in teams but maintained individual identity. They created art that expressed personal rather than collective vision. They built technologies through trial and error rather than careful planning. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy the process of solving problems more than the peace that came from having all problems solved. Exile is the only solution, the recording concluded. Remove them from galactic space before their chaos spreads. Perhaps in time, isolation will teach them the value of order. Veltar shut down the archive and sat in the darkness, finally understanding the magnitude of his ancestors' mistake. They had exiled humanity not because humans were inferior, but because they were different in ways that threatened everything the hegemony believed about civilization itself. And now those exiled humans had returned, having spent 5 centuries learning to weaponize the very traits that made them incompatible with galactic order. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Sarah Chen was preparing to reveal the truth about humanity's ultimate intention. The time for military demonstrations was ending. The time for conversation was beginning. Open a channel to all hegemony communication networks, she commanded. Full broadcast, maximum penetration. I want every being in hegemony space to hear this message. Her communications officer, a young man whose neural implants were so advanced they were invisible, nodded. Channel open, Captain. Broadcasting on all frequencies, including direct neural transmission to implanted populations. Sarah stood before the main view screen, knowing that billions of alien minds were about to hear words that would change everything they believed about the nature of civilization. Citizens of the galactic hegemony, she began, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the human fleet. For 5 centuries, you have lived in peace because your ancestors chose order over chaos, stability, over growth, safety over freedom. She paused, letting the words sink in across thousands of worlds. Your leaders told you that we were exiled because we were too primitive, too violent, too chaotic to exist alongside civilized species. That was partially true. But they never told you why we couldn't accept their gift of neural peace. The view screen behind her lit up with images from the ancient archives. Humans screaming as implants destroyed their minds. Human cities going dark as their inhabitants lost the ability to innovate and create. We weren't rejecting civilization, Sarah continued. We were rejecting mental slavery. The neural implants that bring you peace do so by suppressing the very thoughts and emotions that drive progress. You have achieved perfect stability at the cost of growth. New images appeared. Hegemony worlds 5 centuries ago, vibrant and diverse compared to the same worlds today, unchanged and static. For 500 years, your technology has barely advanced. Your art has remained the same. Your science has solved no new problems because your minds cannot conceive of new questions. You have created a civilization of infinite peace and zero potential. The message was being transmitted directly into the neural implants of every hegemony citizen, bypassing the filters that would normally suppress such disturbing thoughts. Across thousands of worlds, beings who had never experienced true curiosity suddenly found themselves asking questions they had never been able to form. We have returned not as conquerors but as teachers, Sarah announced. We offer you technologies that could revolutionize your civilization, quantum fold drives that make space itself your highway, neural networks that enhance rather than suppress, individual creativity, weapons that could protect you from any threat. She stepped closer to the camera, her eyes holding the intensity of someone who carried the hopes of an entire species. But these gifts come with a price. To accept them, you must abandon the neural controls that have kept you safe for so long. You must embrace the uncertainty, the conflict, the chaos that comes with true freedom. You must become what you were, before you chose safety over growth. The transmission showed human ships throughout hegemony space, no longer hiding but openly demonstrating their capabilities. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that turned enemy systems into art. Technology that seemed to violate physical laws because it had been created by minds unbound by the need for everything to make perfect sense. "We know this choice terrifies you," Sarah admitted. "Your entire civilization is built on the principle that chaos leads to destruction. But you are wrong. Controlled chaos leads to evolution. Embraced uncertainty leads to discovery. The very traits you fear in us are what allowed us to survive exile and return as something greater than what we were." The final image showed Earth itself, green and beautiful, but now occupied by alien colonists who had carved up human civilization like scavengers. "We are not demanding surrender," Sarah concluded. "We are offering partnership. Join us in rediscovering what your species were before they chose order over possibility. Help us build a galaxy where stability and growth coexist, where peace does not require the death of curiosity." The transmission ended, leaving billions of implanted minds struggling to process thoughts and emotions they had never been allowed to experience. Across hegemony space, the perfect order that had lasted for centuries began to crack as citizens asked the most dangerous question in the universe: what if there was a better way? The response to Captain Sarah Chen's broadcast was unlike anything in galactic history. Within hours of the transmission, reports flooded in from across hegemony space of unprecedented civil unrest. But it wasn't violence or revolution. It was something far more dangerous to the established order. Citizens were asking questions. On the industrial world of Kepler 9, factory workers had stopped their assembly lines to examine the products they were making, wondering for the first time who would use them and why. On the agricultural planet of Centauri 7, farmers were experimenting with new growing techniques, creating hybrid crops that their implants should have prevented them from imagining. Most disturbing of all, artists throughout hegemony space had begun creating works that expressed individual rather than collective vision, producing paintings and music that no implanted mind should have been able to conceive. Supreme Commander Veltar stood in the Hegemony Council chamber, facing representatives of all 12 member species. For the first time in centuries, the chamber was filled with genuine argument and debate rather than calm, ordered discussion. "The humans must be destroyed immediately," declared General Thokmar, his warrior instincts finally overriding his neural controls. "Every day we delay, more of our citizens fall under their chaotic influence." "Destroyed with what?" countered Admiral Krecht of the Aquarian Fleet. "We've lost every engagement. Our most advanced technology appears primitive compared to theirs. They've demonstrated capabilities that our science says are impossible." Elder Morvac raised his 4 arms for attention, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 5 centuries. "I have reviewed the classified archives," he announced, causing a stir throughout the chamber. "The original decision to exile humanity was based on fear, not reason. We were afraid that their chaos would spread to our ordered civilization. Now that fear has proven justified." He activated a holographic display showing psychological analysis reports from across hegemony space. Neural implant effectiveness has decreased by 37% since the human broadcast. Citizens are experiencing thoughts and emotions that have been suppressed for generations. Our perfect order is dissolving. "Perhaps," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "it is time to consider whether perfect order was ever truly perfect." The council members turned in shock to see a figure they recognized but had not seen in decades. Dr. Yishka's daughter, Zaraka, one of the few beings in hegemony space who had been born without neural implants due to a rare genetic condition. "You have no authority to address this council," Veltar declared, but his voice lacked its usual commanding certainty. "I have the authority of someone who has lived my entire life, seeing what you have chosen not to see," Zaraka replied, walking calmly to the center of the chamber. "I have watched our civilization stagnate for decades, solving no new problems, creating nothing truly innovative, advancing nowhere." She gestured to the displays showing human technology and capabilities. Look at what they have accomplished. In 5 centuries of exile, they have turned their supposed weaknesses into incredible strengths. They have evolved while we have remained static. They offer us partnership and growth rather than continued stagnation and safety. The debate that followed was unlike anything in hegemony history. For the first time in centuries, council members argued with genuine passion, their neural implants, struggling to suppress emotions and ideas that had been dormant for generations. Some species, led by the military castes, demanded immediate warfare against humanity regardless of the cost. Others, influenced by younger generations who had grown up hearing whispered stories of the time before neural control, called for negotiation and possible acceptance of human terms. While the council debated, Captain Sarah Chen was implementing the final phase of humanity's return. Human ships had taken position around Earth itself, not as conquerors but as reclaimers preparing to offer their former home a choice. The alien colonists who had settled on Earth after humanity's exile watched in terror as human vessels appeared in their skies. They had been told that humans were extinct, that Earth was safely theirs to populate and exploit. Instead, they received the same choice that had been offered to the rest of the galaxy: embrace change and growth or cling to stagnation and order. Many chose change. The Melonian scientists who had established research centers on Earth were the first to respond positively to human offers of partnership. They had always felt constrained by their neural implants, frustrated by research protocols that prevented truly innovative thinking. When human scientists shared their quantum dimensional research techniques, the Melonians experienced intellectual excitement for the first time in their lives. Working together, human and alien researchers began projects that would have been impossible under either civilization alone. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Young aliens, especially those whose implants had been installed more recently and were less deeply integrated, found themselves drawn to human offers of enhanced creativity and individual expression. But not everyone embraced the change. On the fortress world of Nexar Prime, Elder Morvac made his final stand for the old order. Gathering the most conservative elements from all 12 species, he declared the formation of the pure hegemony, dedicated to preserving traditional values and eliminating human influence from the galaxy. The war that followed was brief but decisive. The pure hegemony forces, fighting with traditional tactics and conventional technology, were no match for the combined human-alien fleets that opposed them. But more importantly, they found themselves increasingly alone as their own populations chose growth over safety. The final battle took place in Earth's solar system, where Morvac's fleet made a last, desperate attempt to destroy humanity's homeworld, before their chaos could spread further. But when the pure hegemony ships arrived, they found Earth defended not just by human vessels, but by ships from dozens of alien species who had chosen partnership over isolation. Morvac himself, his forearms shaking with age and defeat, broadcast a final message before his flagship was disabled by weapons that turned his vessel's own systems into a work of art. "We chose order over chaos," he declared. "We chose peace over conflict, we chose safety over growth, and in doing so we chose death over life." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the jointly operated research vessel New Horizon, watching as human and alien crews worked together to unlock the galaxy's greatest mysteries. The ship itself was a marvel of combined technology, using human quantum dimensional drives powered by Melonian energy matrices, with navigation systems designed by Aquarian minds enhanced with human creativity amplifiers. The transformation of galactic civilization had been rapid and total, with neural implants modified to enhance rather than suppress individual thought. Alien species rediscovered capabilities they had forgotten they possessed. Art, science, and technology exploded into new forms as minds, long constrained by artificial order, finally experienced the freedom to imagine and create. Not every species had chosen to join the new galactic community. Some had retreated to isolated systems, clinging to their neural controls and ordered existence. Humanity respected their choice, establishing trade relationships and defensive pacts while allowing them to maintain their preferred way of life. "Status report on the Catalyst Protocol," Sarah requested from her science officer. a young Vraxian whose neural enhancements allowed him to think in ways his ancestors would have found terrifying. 47 species have fully integrated human enhancement technologies, he reported, his blue skin showing patterns of excitement that would have been impossible under the old neural controls. Technological advancement rates have increased by over 800% since integration began. We're seeing breakthrough discoveries almost daily. Sarah nodded with satisfaction, but her expression remained thoughtful. The greatest revenge humanity could have taken would have been conquest and subjugation. Instead, they had chosen something far more powerful. They had proven that the galaxy needed them. The aliens had exiled humanity because they feared that human chaos would destroy their perfect order. Instead, human chaos had revealed that perfect order was itself a form of slow death, and that true peace could only exist alongside the possibility of growth and change. As Sarah watched mixed crews of humans and aliens working together to push the boundaries of known science, she reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this point. 5 centuries of exile had forged humanity into something greater than what they had been, but it had also taught them the value of diversity and partnership. The galaxy had indeed shuddered when humans returned to settle the score. But the tremors weren't from destruction. They were from unprecedented growth as an entire galactic civilization rediscovered what it meant to truly live, rather than merely exist. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating their enemies. It was transforming them into allies, partners, and friends in the greatest adventure the galaxy had ever known. The adventure of unlimited possibility guided by controlled chaos, where order and growth danced together in perfect, chaotic harmony.